As Vinek said, I'm Steve, this is Malk, and we're the authors of Optimize.
I'll hold it up again.
We've got a few questions that have been submitted by various people, so let's just jump straight in with the first question, which is about exams. Optimize is an exams course. Here's the first question.
Okay.
When are the exams changing, and which exams are they exactly?
Okay, when are the exams changing? January 2020, there is a new syllabus for, now we used to call them KET and PET. Cambridge don't seem to want us to call them that anymore, so we call them Key and Preliminary. And we've got a new syllabus, new format from January 2020. So any students taking the exams next year, that'll be the new syllabus. Which means if you're preparing your students for those exams, starting from September, you're going to need updated materials.
Okay.
And that's where we come in.
We've updated Optimize so that it's totally in line with both the new key and preliminary formats that students are going to be taking from 2020 onwards.
And a couple of months ago, actually, I did a webinar on the changes to preliminary, and you can find that on YouTube, and I really go into detail there as to what the exam will be like from January 2020.
Okay, so question number 2. Optimize is a course for teens. Question number 2 is, what's the best way to get teens talking in class when they are shy and they don't want to talk?
Yeah.
You're nodding like that's your question.
It's a
Okay,
good question.
very good question. All right. I think that there are a few practical strategies you can take. The first one I want to mention is I think a lot of shyness is a consequence of teachers' attitudes to errors.
Yeah.
Some students are shy because we as teachers can be too quick to jump in and we make our classrooms all about accuracy. Now, in exam preparation classes, of course, accuracy is very important. But at the same time, we've got to be very careful that we don't turn English into an end and not a means, where it becomes an object of study, where accuracy is all that matters, and our students' desires to communicate get lost. So I think that sometimes one technique that we can use is to just back off on the correction and on the demands for accuracy.
Yeah. I think another, with some teenagers, they don't really like talking about themselves and their personal lives and their feelings and their emotions. It's a very difficult time, isn't it, being a teenager? So one way to kind of deal with that is to get them to role play, to act, to take on a character. Not all teenagers enjoy that, but the shy ones, strangely, interestingly, often do. And they really can start performing in a way that they don't like to do when they're talking about themselves.
And I think there's a question of to what extent the communication in your classroom is like this with you, and to what extent it's like that between peers.
Yeah.
Often students are shy because you're asking them to speak in open class in front of everybody.
Yeah.
We can mitigate that a little by putting them into groups, getting them to talk to each other. And as Malk said, I think that while some teenagers want more personalization, they want to talk about themselves, lots don't. And so I think there we need to reframe the kind of questions we're asking and to ask more abstract questions. Like, rather than what do you think, maybe our questions should be like, what are the results of this? Or what are the problems with this? Rather than you. I think that helps as well.
Yeah. I think another thing, in some classrooms, I have seen this, it's teacher talking time, teacher talking time, teacher talking time, teacher talking time, and then 2 or 3 minutes of student talking time. And that's not the right way to go. It should be student talking time all the way through. And the atmosphere in the class should be encouraging students to talk at any possible opportunity. And I think that really helps. The students then just get used to it. Talking is not something special. Oh, the focus is now on me, because they're talking all the time anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I would just make one final small point on this issue of shyness, that because students are reluctant to speak in class, that doesn't mean they're not learning.
Yeah.
Sometimes people need to go at their own pace.
Yeah.
They need to take it in their own way. Shyness does not mean they are... a reluctance to speak, let's say, does not mean that they're not learning. So sometimes the solution is don't worry about it too much and don't force it.
Don't force them, absolutely. If they don't want to speak, don't force them. That'll just make it worse. Next question.
Next question. How can we make exam classes fun at the same time as successful?
Yeah.
I think there is a real problem with it. I've never understood why exam classes and general English classes should be so completely different. There's no reason why exam classes should be dry and boring.
None at all.
So we've got a few suggestions. Games and competitions. At this age, teenagers, they love competing, being involved in games. Some of you may have seen, Malcolm, our session yesterday. We did a session on word formation. Now, on paper, word formation seems like a dry, boring topic. But in fact, I think there are various ways that you can. There's somebody here has got. I noticed the word gamification. There are various ways you can gamify it, I think, to make it more interesting. We had one task which was specifically for word formation. Give students various root words, and they have to compete to try and find words that form derivatives in the same way, like universal, practical. So we turn it into a game, make it a competition, make it a race, maybe. I think that's one way.
Yeah. I mean, I think, as Steve said, this idea that exam classes have to be dry and boring and serious, I just think we need to get rid of that completely. It's the energy and the enthusiasm of the teacher that infects the students. And all classes should be like that all the time. Just because we're preparing students for exams, it doesn't mean we suddenly have to stop smiling, stop laughing, stop telling jokes, stop having fun. It's all about the atmosphere.
And I think it's also a question of the kind of materials you choose.
Yeah.
When your materials are engaging and lively and have meaningful content, then the lesson has an energy about it, and it has a kind of flow about it. In some ways, I'm not even sure that fun is the right concept. It's about being high energy and having the right flow.
Let's move on to the next question then, because I think that connects.
This is leading into the next question, which is, how can we make exam materials relevant to teens, and how can we make exam writing fun?
One of the real problems with exams is that almost all of the tasks that our students have to do when they're in that exam room on their own are completely unconnected to their real lives. No one in their real life is doing sentence transformations. No one in their real life is doing multiple choice. And exams do have this pretense sometimes that things are real world. So write a short story for an international young person's short story competition. Write an article for an international magazine for young people. But do your students actually write short stories for competitions in real life?
Probably not.
No. Do they really write articles for international magazines for young people in real life? No. It's a pretense. It's a pretense that we make to make it look like it's real world, but it's not. So almost everything that they're doing in the exam is not connected to the real world and not connected to their real lives. So I think one thing that obviously we have to do this exam practice. They need to be comfortable when they go into the exam. They need to be able to achieve the task. But to lead up to that, the more that we can bring in things that are connected to their own lives, connected to the real world, the better. So, I mean, just for example, text messaging. There's no text messaging in exams, but our students are doing it all the time. So let's use text messaging. Articles, we've just said our students don't really write articles, but they do write posts on social media. Doesn't matter if it's not in English, they are used to writing a post and then commenting on it. So as a lead in to writing an article, let's get them to write a post on social media with the same content and then comment on it.
Yeah, and I think there's also, we said earlier that maybe with some students, they don't necessarily want personalization. I think with lots of teenagers, that is exactly what they want. They want to talk about themselves, their own lives and interests, especially around this level of B1, where if you look at the Common European Framework, the B1 descriptors are all about, I can express my hopes, my ambitions, my desires, my my life. It's largely about my life. What we've done in Optimize, we did give quite a bit of thought to this. What we did in Optimize was we tried to systematize it, because it's all very well giving students a topic and then saying, what do you think? Or do you agree or disagree? That's fine, but it's limited and it's unsystematic. So what we decided to do is we decided to use these personalization tasks, and we've got 5 topic headings: think, research, culture, learn, and me, because we want to cover students' critical thinking skills, students' research and real-world awareness skills, students' cultural awareness, students' learning skills, and talking about their own life with me. So when they cover a topic, we try to personalize it and engage them by connecting to different areas of their lives.
They're really, really simple, but really effective. I think that they're one of the aspects of Optimize that I'm most proud of, and I think they really, really work.
Malc mentioned his webinar earlier. He did a webinar on exams. I did a webinar recently for Macmillan on motivating teens. So I believe it's on YouTube. One of the things I mentioned in that was engaging topics and how important it is to not to bring the shallow world of, it's too easy to think we need celebrities in our materials, or we need social media in our materials, because that's what students' lives are. That's true, but let's take interesting angles on them and try and, because I think most of our students come to our classes with a more sophisticated expectation than sometimes we give them credit for. They want to learn. We need to give them something to learn.
Let's have another question. Have we got one more?
Yes.
Got one more?
Next question.
It's probably the final one, I think.
I think this is the final. No, we've had that one.
Something about fears.
Okay, our final question. What measures can I take to motivate my young learners to remove their exam fears? Exam phobia and exam fears.
Yeah, I mean, that's, when you're taking a high stakes exam, there is going to be stress and there is going to be pressure, but we've got to reduce that as much as possible. I think the first thing I would say is that when a student, I kind of said this a few minutes ago, but when a student goes into an exam and they're faced with that exam paper on their own, they've got to be absolutely comfortable with it. There shouldn't be any surprises. They should know exactly what they're going to face and exactly how they're going to approach each part of that exam. So we have to do, unfortunately, exam practice. We can't avoid it.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with practice. The mistake is when our lessons become dominated by
just exam practice.
Sentence transformation.
Absolutely.
But clearly students need to go in comfortable with the format.
Yeah.
And to the extent that you have control over it, they need to be doing the exam when they're ready to do the exam, not too soon.
Yeah.
In some circumstances, you might have control if it's an external exam. In some circumstances, you might not have that kind of control, but making sure our students are ready for it.
Yeah, and just because it's a high stakes exam doesn't mean the teacher and the parents have to put that pressure on the students. They don't have to say, this is a really important exam, it's vital that you pass, you should be panicking and worrying. That's not going to help at all. The more that you can relax the students and say, okay, it's an important exam, but you're ready for it. I wouldn't enter you for this exam if I didn't think you were ready. So don't worry, don't panic. And yes, sometimes things can go wrong in exams. If it goes wrong, don't worry, you can take it again.
I'll just make one final little point, which is nobody should be staying up studying into the small hours of the morning the night before they do an exam.
Yeah.
Go and watch a movie.
In English.
To be honest, if you don't know it now, you're never going to know it.
Yeah.
The night before an exam should be a time not for heaping on the pressure, but a time for taking off the pressure. Do something, this is my advice to students, work hard, but then the night before the exam, do something you enjoy and try to relax. Okay, great.
I think that's it.
Thank you very much for joining us and listening to us. We're going to be floating around here. If you want to come up to us and ask any more questions, We're here for the rest of the lunch break.
And
So,
do please have a look at Optimize.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.